I am your host, Alex Jones. Let me just list to you some of the videos we're going to be playing, some of the reports we're going to be covering today, some of the information we're going to be breaking down. U.S. planning troop buildup in Gulf after exit from Iraq. I was told, as you know, 2 weeks ago by multiple military sources, some of them that came on air, CIA, you name it, that Israel has gotten the green light to hit Iran. And they are looking to do it just in the next few weeks. That was a few weeks ago. That within 2 weeks, the window was opening. That doesn't mean that we can't speak out against this and stop it. That was also, that point was also made 2 weeks ago. And here is the New York Times saying that the troops are being moved out of Iraq into Kuwait and other areas with an eye on the threat of a belligerent Iran. That's a quote. That's the New York Times yesterday. Here's another one from Friday, the Washington Times. Israeli prisoner swap may be prelude to attack on Iran. And they quote Haaretz newspaper. They quote Jerusalem Post military correspondents. They quote confidants of Benjamin Netanyahu, saying that he believes now is the time to look at striking Iran, and this will be his defining Churchill moment. Don't forget that in 2007, Israel hit a clandestine nuclear reactor in Syria. So, I mean, here's the New York Times saying they're getting ready for it. Here's the Washington Times saying it. I've got several other articles we're going to be going over on this front. And whether you're for this war or against it, the United States is probably going to get sucked into it. And we saw Mr. Baer come out, the former top CIA field commander. Robert Baer came out 2 weeks ago and said they're greenlighting the attack. You saw Ray McGovern come on this show, former top advisor to Ronald Reagan and George Bush Sr., top CIA analyst, morning briefer to the presidents, saying, yes, the green light's been given. Never before has he said that on the show. You saw the Have the Bin Laden group, what Shearer, come out and say the green light's been given to hit Iran and it's a horrible idea. And will actually keep the hardline regime in power right as their people are on the verge of over 70% of the Persians do not like their government. That's on record. So why bomb their government, then entrenching them more? And it was all these other experts about a day after I came out and said, my military sources are saying this. And that's why they launched that whole story about the guy down in Corpus Christi, Texas, who was a used car salesman hanging out with the Iranian secret police, and they were going to bomb the Saudi Arabian ambassador in D.C. and kill him and all this other garbage. And it came out within days. Hundreds of analysts, including former Bush administration expert on Persia, and that's Iran for folks that don't know. They came out and said this is total baloney, and it turned out it was completely made up, and it was the Iranian opposition group funded here in the U.S. that was out there manipulating people and involved with elements of the Mexican mafia in all of this. It was a complete made-up fake sting where there's nothing to sting. But it was blamed on Iran, and we heard, we've got to hit Iran, and Congressman King said, we've got to hit them. So the green light is on, but it has dimmed because just like 4 years ago, Admiral Fox Fallon, the head of CENTCOM, it later came out, even in Esquire, was ordered to hit Iran. And he said, I'm not doing it. And then basically was forced to resign. And right at that time, Ray McGovern came on our show, and he still claims it was just a good guess. Yeah, right. And he said, look, the plan would be to paint up U.S. patrol boats to look like Iranian patrol boats and have them do a mock or real attack on a U.S. aircraft carrier, frigate, or destroyer there near the Strait of Hormuz to get us into Iran. A year later, McGovern said this 5 years ago, a year later it came out in major newspapers and magazines, New York Times, but also Seymour Hersh, Pulitzer Prize winner, New York magazine, The New Yorker. It was in The New Yorker came out and said that plan had actually been green-lighted by Cheney, and they'd already painted the boats up, but then Bush killed it. So, and then Cheney just wrote a book saying he wanted to hit Iran and got stopped. So when you understand the duplicity and how they get us into wars, we would have already been in this war with Iran if the head of CENTCOM hadn't said, Admiral Fallon said, no, I'm not doing this. And so we're very close to an Iran strike. Now, when I've had other people on, they've said not 2 weeks, Alex. They've said it could be a couple months, but they're not going to want to hit once the main winter has begun. Regardless, I just read to you the New York Times. I just read to you the Washington Times. I got a stack of others we're going to get to. The stars are aligning for an Iran attack. And then on top of it, ladies and gentlemen, I have family who's been deployed to Kuwait. I have other sources. Once I learned that information, the family always doesn't make a secret of where they're going or what they're doing. Just innumerable tours in combat zones. Innumerable. I mean, people think 7 tours is a lot. Try 15 or something. I mean, it's ridiculous. And they would not say, and got a little grumpy about even being asked. And then I was talking Tuesday, flying in. The Austin Police Department can verify this if they want the fellow's name. I was flying into the Austin airport from shooting another season of a couple episodes of Jesse Ventura's show, Conspiracy Theory. I was flying back in from Vegas where we were out there at some rocket bases and stuff, and I was up in the front row right next to this Air Force officer, and he was flying back with the flag and the body onto the plane of the Southwest Airlines flight of his dead friend who died in an improvised explosives device attack in Iraq a few weeks before. And I was talking to him, and I brought all this up, and he said, well, you absolutely know what you're talking about. Israel's going to hit them, and we're going to back them. And again, he knew. I told him I was a radio host and everything. He said, it's no secret. He said, you know, and by the way, well, then we land. The reason I say police know about it, they have water cannons spraying the plane. They had all these police cars and motorcycles, and we all got off, you know, to respect the person as they were, the dead veteran as they were brought off in their flag-draped coffin and everything else. And in fact, I meant to look that up. A Fort Hood burial Wednesday of soldier killed by IED, Air Force MP, killed in IED attack in Iraq. I wanted to actually get the guy's name. The fella told me on the plane in the 2.5-hour flight, but obviously I wasn't sitting there taking notes. My point is, I've talked off record to 6 different military officers now. I've talked on record to all these high-powered people. You've seen all the other folks on the news saying this is moving into the green light. And they would have already probably hit Iran, is the word I had. Steve Pachinik, former Black Ops commander for the State Department and directed CIA and Pentagon Special Forces operations. Overthrows of governments. Type Steve Pachinik in. You'll see him overthrowing major governments, one after the other. He came on and said, yes, they've green-lighted an attack on Iran. But it's because that hoax that used car salesman was going to wreak all this havoc and kill the Saudi ambassador, because that hoax got exposed as a hoax. Now the system's sitting there cooking up the next hoax. But Israel, I mean, I just read to you what Netanyahu's telling people, that he's intending to go ahead and hit Iran. And it won't be like when they hit Syria and blew up one primitive secret research laboratory. I mean, Iran has got this thing, you know, these things dug in more than a tick on a hound dog. All right, the really big news, straight ahead on the Euro, what's happening there. Ron Paul wins both tallies at GOP straw poll. I've got some incredible psychological warfare news. I would just like to point out to longtime listeners, new listeners, and first-time listeners, you can check the facts on this. It's like John Wayne would say, no brag, just fact. This is the #1 alternative radio/internet system in the world. #1 in alternative films. #1 in every category. #1. And growing exponentially. Quite a responsibility. And it's important that I remember that myself from time to time and go back over some of the basics for all the new listeners that are tuning in. And we also need to open the phones up today. We'll do that coming up in the next segment. I'll give the number out. Then we'll start getting to your calls before this hour has ended. I want to warn you, I tend to follow the classic talk radio model in some respects, but not in many others. Like, I tend to not at the start of the show hype up everything that's coming up. In fact, I tend to do the opposite. I tend to just mention a few stories that are important and then build. Because I get ready for the show, and then the first story I launch into, I have a tendency to spend most of the time on that and then not get to the others. But in the interest of actually just letting you know some of the stuff here in front of me that I will try to get back into and break down with more detail, ATF Gunwalker update, Eric Holder to testify on Fast and Furious, CBS News. Also, we aired clips from C-SPAN earlier in the week where Miss Napolitano, the head of Homeland Security, admitted 2 years ago they were running this program, and then later testified before Congress that she hadn't, and we just went and got the videos and pointed it out. In fact, the video's online. Just type in Janet Napolitano caught in perjury on Fast and Furious. We did that as a radio report earlier in the week and a InfoWars Nightly News. And it's right there, 100%. As I told you a year ago, we caught them in the press conferences. We knew they were going to blame the Second Amendment for the stuff in Mexico years ago because they were having the press conferences. And I had sources that they were shipping the guns into Mexico, like Celi Castile and others, DEA agent. And now it's all there. And I told you Bush was involved. And what did Issa come out a week ago and say? Bush is involved. This goes back to Bush. Of course it does. It goes back to Iran-Contra. It goes back to coffins flying back from Vietnam full of heroin. The big banks run America. They don't care about our sovereignty. They use our military. They use our entire system. They made drugs illegal so they could jack up the prices of them and arrest their competition. Wake up. Wake up. In fact, we may have new listeners who won't believe it. Just type in Issa, Bush involved in gun running scandal. Just and show them Fox News and AP. Show them by that. If you hear me talk and you're a radio listener, just put it into a search engine, what I say. Or if you're watching at prisonplanet.tv, you can see us show it to you. Here's another one from Associated Press. House panel may subpoena White House documents. Well, we already have Operation Gunrunner and FF, Fast and Furious, in their press conferences in 2009 and 2010. I mean, Holder came down to South Texas and gave multiple speeches in Brownsville, and then he went over to El Paso in the middle of 2009, blaming the Second Amendment for our problems and mentioning Project Gunrunner as his proof to try to ban semi-automatics in America. And then he gets up there and says he knows nothing about it when he's giving stinking press conferences, and we got the stinking video. We got the stinking video of Napolitano. Why won't Issa hammer them? They should all be arrested right now because it'll bring up Bush. There it is. Issa acknowledges gun probes similar. Not identical to Fast and Furious under Bush. Yeah, it wasn't called that. But the Sinaloa documents came out in federal court. They're allowed to bring cocaine in. The U.S. government ships in the weapons directly to them. And what source is that out of? Because I don't, in that browser, it doesn't show me. Is that CBS or is that Fox? Back it all the way out so I can see the header. It's Fox. Back it all the way out so viewers can see the header. Okay, there, it's Fox. They'll think we made it up unless they see the header. Folks, type that in yourself and go find it. Now, thank you. That said, we have this news here. You've heard all these Democratic senators call for the return of the fairness doctrine to restrict free speech on talk radio, and the FCC has said if they do expand it, it would be into the internet. So it's fair that I not have cutting analysis and historical gravitas and actually tell it like it is. I would have to fumble around and only cover mainstream media and regurgitate. That wouldn't be fair if I read a federal court document where they declared national security 6 months ago and admitted the U.S. government ships in narcotics and arms the cartels to kill each other to keep prices up. That's how I knew all this. That's how I knew Bush was involved, because it's in the stinking federal documents. But see, oh no, we can't have that. You see, they're panicking. And so Google on Monday put out its transparency report, and it turns out in 2010, because they always put the stuff out close to a year late, The federal government requested that, quote, feds order YouTube to remove video for containing government criticism.